The moment Olivia laughed, every word I had practiced on the drive over disappeared. It wasn't a small laugh. It wasn't nervous. It was the kind that made people at the next table glance our way before pretending they hadn't heard anything. You're serious? She pressed one hand against her forehead, trying to stop herself, but another laugh escaped anyway. I've never seen you joke like this. My fingers tightened around the leather folder resting on my lap. It held everything. 3 years of sketches, business plans, budgets, marketing ideas, late-night notes written after finishing 2 exhausting jobs. I had imagined this dinner 100 different ways. In every version, she smiled. Maybe she worried. Maybe she questioned my plan. But she believed in me. Instead, I sat across from the woman I loved while she looked at my dream as if it were a funny story. I am serious. The words came out calmer than I expected. I've been working on this for years. She blinked. Years? I nodded. I wanted to tell you after everything was ready. The smile slowly disappeared from her face, replaced by confusion. Ethan, you're 29. I know. You already have 2 jobs. I know. And now you want to quit one of them to make video games? It's not just making games. I carefully opened the folder. My own independent studio. Charts covered the first page. Projected costs. Development schedules. A timeline stretching over the next 4 years. I've already saved enough for the first stage. She barely looked. Instead, her eyes drifted toward the restaurant window. Luxury cars rolled past outside. One of them stopped near the entrance. A man stepped out wearing an expensive suit. Olivia watched him for a second before looking back at me. You know who that reminds me of? I already knew. Daniel. She gave a small shrug. He worked hard. So did I. He built something real. The sentence landed harder than she realized. This is real. Her fingers gently pushed the folder back across the table. No, it is. Ethan. She leaned closer. This isn't about hurting you. Then help me understand. Her voice softened. I've watched you come home exhausted every night. I know. You barely sleep. I know. You skip vacations. I know. And after all that, this is your plan? I smiled without meaning to. Exactly. She stared at me as if I had confirmed every fear she carried. I thought you were saving for our future. I am. This doesn't feel like it. A waiter quietly placed our meals on the table. Neither of us touched the food. Steam drifted into the air between us like another conversation neither of us wanted to have. I've already talked with developers online. I slid another document toward her. I even found potential investors. She didn't pick it up. Ethan. There was pity in her voice now. I love that you dream. My heart lifted. For one tiny second. But dreams don't pay mortgages. The warmth disappeared just as quickly. They can. They usually don't. I swallowed. I've done the research. You've done research. She emphasized the last word with a tired smile. Daniel owns 2 apartments. There it was again. Daniel. He started a company at 26. Another comparison. My parents adore him. I looked down at my untouched dinner. I'm not trying to become Daniel. I know. I want to become me. Her expression softened. For a moment, I thought she understood. Instead, she reached across the table and gently covered my hand. I don't want to spend the next 10 years hoping. I don't want you to. Then choose something safer. The restaurant suddenly felt too warm. I've already chosen. She slowly pulled her hand away. So have I. Before I could ask what that meant, a familiar voice echoed across the room. There they are. Olivia's parents. Neither of us had expected them. Her mother walked over first, dressed elegantly as always. Her father followed with the confidence of someone who believed every room belonged to him. What a wonderful surprise. Her mother kissed Olivia's cheek before turning toward me. Ethan. A polite smile. Nothing more. Her father pulled out a chair without asking. Mind if we join? Olivia looked nervous. It's fine. Within seconds, another table had been pushed beside ours. Menus arrived. Drinks followed. The quiet dinner I had planned disappeared completely. Her mother noticed the folder almost immediately. Oh. She tilted her head. What's all this? Olivia hesitated. Ethan was telling me about His business? Her father smiled with interest. Business? I nodded. I'm planning to start my own game development studio. He reached for the folder. I handed it over. For almost a full minute, he flipped through the pages. No expression. No reaction. Then he closed it. A small chuckle escaped him. I'm sorry. He rubbed his chin. I honestly thought this was a proposal for a promotion. He slid the folder back toward me. This? Another quiet laugh. This is a hobby pretending to be a business. A hobby. The words stayed in the air long after his laugh ended. Olivia's mother gave him an amused smile before turning toward me. You've always been creative, Ethan. She reached for her glass. But creativity doesn't build a family. It can, I answered quietly. Her father folded his hands on the table. Let me guess. You'll make one successful game, become a millionaire, and retire before 40. The sarcasm drew another laugh. Even a couple sitting nearby glanced toward us. Heat rushed into my face, but I kept my voice steady. I don't expect overnight success. No. I've planned for years. I opened the folder again and pointed to the financial pages. I've saved enough to support myself for the first stage. I'll keep one job while building the studio. If things don't work after a certain point, I already have backup plans. Her father barely looked. You sound confident. I've worked hard for this. So did thousands of dreamers. He leaned back. You know where most of them end up? I stayed quiet. Back in regular jobs. Olivia gently touched her father's arm. Dad, what? Someone has to be honest. Her mother nodded in agreement. We only want what's best for both of you. I forced a small smile. I appreciate that. Then appreciate this advice. Her father pointed toward the restaurant entrance. A man like Daniel knows how the real world works. The name landed on the table again. He has investments. Another sentence. He owns property. Another. He can provide security. I closed the folder. I'm not trying to compete with Daniel. But life already compares you. No one spoke for several seconds. The waiter returned to ask if everything tasted okay. None of us had touched our food. It's perfect. Olivia answered automatically. The waiter smiled politely and walked away. As soon as he disappeared, her mother looked at Olivia. Honey, she lowered her voice. Have you actually thought about your future? Olivia hesitated. I have. And her fingers slowly wrapped around her fork. She stopped halfway through the sentence. Her father finished it for her. You deserve stability. His eyes met mine. So does our future grandson. I almost laughed. We weren't even married. Yet somehow I had already become an irresponsible father in their imagination. I've never avoided responsibility. No. Her mother offered a sympathetic smile. You've simply chosen the harder road, the meaningful road. She sighed. Ethan, sometimes those aren't the same. My appetite disappeared completely. The dinner I had planned for weeks had turned into an interview I was never going to pass. Olivia finally spoke again. What if? She paused. What if you waited? I frowned. Waited. A few more years. I already have. I mean until we're married. And after that, she didn't answer. Then after the house? Still nothing. Then after kids? Her eyes slowly dropped to the table. I understood. There would always be another reason. Another delay. Another excuse. Eventually the dream wouldn't disappear because I failed. It would disappear because I never allowed myself to try. The check arrived. Before I could reach for it, Olivia's father placed his card on the tray. I've got this. I can pay. I know. His smile felt heavier than his words. But tonight, he looked around the expensive restaurant. Let someone successful handle dinner. Something inside me cracked. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough that I knew it would never fit back together the same way. We stepped outside into the cool evening air. Cars moved through the streets. People laughed as they walked past us. The world kept moving, completely unaware that mine had just stopped. Olivia stood beside me while her parents walked toward their car. I'm sorry. For what? She wrapped her arms around herself. They're old-fashioned. They're honest. She looked up. I never wanted tonight to become this. What did you want? I wanted us to talk. We did. Not like this. I nodded slowly. Then tell me something. She waited. When you picture your future, the question caught in my throat for a second. Do you still see me in it? She didn't answer immediately. That silence lasted only a few seconds. It felt like hours. I don't know. There it was. Not anger. Not rejection. Something even worse. Uncertainty. After 6 years together, she wasn't sure anymore. A black luxury car stopped across the street. Daniel stepped out wearing an expensive suit, laughing into his phone. He hadn't noticed us. Olivia's eyes followed him for only a moment. It wasn't jealousy that hurt. It was comparison. She wasn't looking at him. She was measuring me against him. I should go. Her voice sounded distant. Yeah. She stepped closer as if she wanted to hug me. Instead, she stopped halfway. Drive safely. You too. She walked toward her parents without looking back. I stood on the sidewalk until their car disappeared around the corner. The drive home felt longer than usual. Rain tapped softly against the windshield. The radio played songs I wasn't listening to. Every traffic light gave me another minute to replay the evening. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was chasing something impossible. Maybe love really wasn't enough. I unlocked my apartment and stepped inside. The place felt strangely quiet. I tossed my keys onto the kitchen counter and loosened my tie. As I walked toward the living room, something caught my attention. Our framed photo. The one from our beach trip. It always faced the couch. Tonight it was turned face down. I picked it up carefully. The glass reflected my tired face. A thin layer of dust covered the back. Someone hadn't knocked it over. Someone had placed it that way. I slowly set it upright again. Then I reached for my keys. Something was missing. The small silver apartment key Olivia always carried wasn't attached anymore. Only the empty key ring remained. My heartbeat slowed instead of racing. Deep down, I already knew what that meant. My phone vibrated. One unread message. Olivia. I opened it. Maybe it's time we wanted different things. The screen stayed bright in my hand. Outside, the rain grew heavier. Inside, I stood completely still, staring at 12 words that quietly ended the life I thought we were building together. The apartment felt twice as empty after Olivia left. Her coffee mug was gone. The bookshelf had a clean space where her favorite novels used to be. Even the little plant she insisted would never survive without her had disappeared from the windowsill. Only one thing remained. The apartment key she had quietly removed from my keychain. It rested on the kitchen counter beside the unread message that had ended 6 years of my life. Maybe it's time we wanted different things. I read those words again. Then again. Each time, they somehow became colder. My phone buzzed before I could throw it across the room. Michael, you alive? Barely. I'm outside. 5 minutes later he walked in carrying 2 paper cups of coffee. His eyes swept across the apartment. No pictures, no blankets, no Olivia. A long breath escaped him. So, she really did it. I nodded. Neither of us touched the coffee. He sat beside me without trying to fill the silence. Sometimes that was exactly what I needed. You still have the folder? I pointed toward my desk. The business plan sat exactly where I had left it, untouched, like it belonged to someone else now. Michael picked it up carefully. You worked 3 years on this. It doesn't matter anymore. His eyebrows lifted. That's not you talking. It feels pointless. It feels painful. He placed the folder back on the desk. Those aren't the same thing. My phone buzzed again. Then again. Messages flooded the screen. At first I thought people wanted to know if I was okay. I couldn't have been more wrong. Chris, bro. Heard about you and Olivia. Emma. Honestly, maybe she made the right decision. Nathan. Dreams are great, but you have to grow up eventually. Another message appeared. Then another. Someone had already posted a picture online. Olivia stood beside Daniel outside an expensive restaurant. The caption almost made me laugh. Sometimes the right person arrives at the right time. The photo had only been online for an hour. Hundreds of likes. Dozens of comments. People I had laughed with. People who had eaten dinner in my apartment. People who once called me family. She deserves someone successful. Daniel is such an upgrade. Love isn't enough. I locked the phone before another message appeared. Michael quietly slid it across the table. Don't read them. I thought they were my friends. They were her friends. There was a difference. I finally took a sip of coffee. It had already gone cold. Just like dinner the night, everything fell apart. Days passed without meaning. Work, sleep, wake up, repeat. My body kept moving while my mind stayed somewhere inside that restaurant. Every unfinished sentence came back. Every smile I should have recognized. Every warning I ignored. One rainy evening, I finished my warehouse shift and drove straight to the tiny office I rented for my project. Office sounded generous. It was one room above an old repair shop. The ceiling leaked whenever it rained. The heater barely worked. Half the lights flickered. Still, it had been my favorite place in the world. Tonight it felt different. Dust covered the keyboard. Empty coffee cups lined the desk. Sticky notes covered the wall. Game mechanics, story ideas, character sketches. 3 years of my life stared back at me. I turned on the computer. The familiar loading screen appeared. Hundreds of files filled the monitor. Artwork, music, code, animation tests. Every late night, every missed holiday, every overtime shift, everything. The mouse hovered over one folder. Project Horizon, my dream. A small window appeared. Delete folder? My finger rested on the mouse. One click. That was all it would take. No more disappointment. No more impossible dreams. No more proving myself. The office door suddenly opened. Ethan? Michael. He stopped after seeing the screen. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. His eyes moved from the monitor to my hand. You were really going to do it? I couldn't answer. My throat refused to cooperate. He walked over quietly. Instead of grabbing the mouse or giving me another speech, he reached for the chair beside mine and sat down. His gaze stayed on the screen. So that's how it ends? I stared at the delete button. Maybe. You know what's funny? I waited. If this project failed after you gave it everything, he smiled sadly. I'd still be proud of you. The words landed differently than every piece of advice I'd heard over the past week. You know what I keep hearing? I rubbed my eyes. That Olivia was smart. That Daniel is successful. That I should have grown up. Michael leaned back. And what do you think? I looked at the computer screen, then at the hundreds of hours hidden inside those folders. I don't know anymore. He nodded slowly. Good. I frowned. Good. If you still knew everything right now. He stood and gently pushed the mouse away from my hand. You wouldn't have anything left to learn. My fingers slipped off the delete button. The folder stayed exactly where it belonged. Not because I believed in myself again. Because I wasn't ready to bury the person I used to be. The delete window disappeared from the screen. Project Horizon was still there. So was every late night, every sacrifice, and every promise I had made to myself. Michael grabbed the cold coffee sitting on the desk and took a sip. His face twisted immediately. This tastes terrible. A tired smile escaped me. You still drank it. Some things are worth finishing. He placed the cup beside my keyboard. So, what's next? I stared at the monitor. I honestly don't know. Good. There you go again. You don't need all the answers tonight. He picked up his jacket and headed for the door. You only need one. I raised an eyebrow. Are you quitting? Or are you trying? The question stayed behind after he left. I worked until sunrise. Not because I suddenly believed success was waiting around the corner. Because deleting everything would have hurt even more than failing. A week later, my phone rang while I was fixing inventory at the warehouse. An unfamiliar number flashed across the screen. Normally, I ignored unknown calls. Something told me not to. Hello? Ethan? The voice sounded familiar. Sophia. A warm laugh came through the speaker. So you still remember me? College was a long time ago. Not that long. I leaned against a shelf. How did you get my number? Michael. Of course. He told me what happened. I closed my eyes. I didn't ask him to. I know. Her tone softened. He was worried. I'm fine. No. She let the silence hang for a moment. You're surviving. There was a difference. What do you need? I'm putting together a small indie game. I blinked. You. 3 people. She chuckled. For if you say yes. I don't think I'm ready. That's exactly why I'm calling. I laughed quietly. You always were stubborn. And you always had the best ideas. She paused. I still remember your final project. That old adventure game? I remember everyone laughing because you spent 6 months on something that wasn't even graded. Another pause. I also remember everyone secretly lining up to play it. A memory I hadn't visited in years suddenly returned. Maybe my dream hadn't started 3 years ago. Maybe it had started much earlier. I can't promise much. You don't have to. The budget is tiny. I know. The office is basically a garage. I know. We can't even pay full salaries yet. I know. So, why are you still listening? Her answer came without hesitation. Because I need people who love creating more than getting rich. Those words reached somewhere Olivia's never had. When do we start? Tomorrow. The garage smelled like fresh paint and old electronics. 3 folding tables. For second-hand computers. 1 whiteboard covered in sketches. Nothing looked impressive. Everything felt alive. Sophia handed me a paper cup of coffee. Welcome to our billion-dollar headquarters. I laughed. Needs better furniture. We're aiming high. The small team welcomed me with tired smiles instead of handshakes. Nobody cared about expensive suits. Nobody asked how much money I made. Nobody laughed when I talked about game mechanics. Hours disappeared without anyone noticing. Ideas bounced across the room. Someone sketched while another coded. Music played softly from an old speaker with one broken side. Near midnight, Sophia placed another coffee beside me. You've barely moved. I forgot what time it was. Good sign. She noticed the dark circles under my eyes. When was the last time you slept? I shrugged. I'll sleep after this feature works. Wrong answer. She slid a sandwich across the desk. Eat first. Simple. Normal. Nobody treated passion like a disease here. Weeks became months. Months became more months. Life settled into a new rhythm. Warehouse during the day. Studio every evening. Coding until 2 or 3 in the morning. Home. Sleep. Repeat. It wasn't glamorous. Some nights we celebrated fixing a single bug. Other nights we stared at the screen wondering if we'd ever finish. Whenever frustration hit, nobody blamed anyone. Someone quietly ordered pizza. Someone else drew a funny character on the whiteboard. Then we kept going. Little by little, the confidence I thought was gone started finding its way back. Not through revenge. Not through proving Olivia wrong. Through work. Real work. Meanwhile, pieces of Olivia's new life kept appearing online. Vacation photos. Luxury restaurants. Business events. Daniel stood beside her in almost every picture. Designer clothes. Bright smiles. Perfect captions. Anyone scrolling through social media would think she had found the perfect life. Yet every now and then another photo appeared. She wasn't smiling, just staring into the distance while everyone else celebrated. One evening, Grace, Olivia's younger sister, accidentally liked one of my old development posts from years ago. A few minutes later, she sent a short message. Sorry, didn't mean to hit like. Before I could respond, another message arrived. She still checks your page sometimes. Nothing else. No explanation. No apology. The conversation ended there. I locked my phone and returned to my computer. The screen displayed the opening scene of our game. A sunrise stretched across the digital mountains we had spent months creating. Sophia rolled her chair beside mine. It finally feels real. I nodded. It does. She smiled. You know what's funny? What? The people who laugh first usually become the ones asking for interviews later. I didn't answer. I wasn't thinking about interviews. I wasn't thinking about Olivia. I was thinking about tomorrow's work. For the first time in a long while, that was enough. 16 months passed faster than I expected. One rainy morning, I unlocked the studio door before anyone else arrived. The inbox on my computer showed one new email. The sender's name made me stop breathing. I opened it with shaking hands. Congratulations. Project Horizon has been officially selected for this year's Global Independent Game Showcase. The email stayed open on my screen. I read it once, then again. By the 5th time, the words still didn't feel real. Project Horizon has been officially selected for this year's Global Independent Game Showcase. The office door opened behind me. Sophia walked in carrying breakfast sandwiches. You got here early. She stopped after seeing my face. What happened? I turned the monitor toward her. She leaned closer. Her eyes moved across the screen. 1 second later, the sandwich slipped from her hand. No way. A laugh escaped her before she covered her mouth. No, no way. She grabbed my shoulders and shook me. Ethan, this is it. The excitement in her voice finally pulled me back to reality. We actually made it. She nodded so hard a few strands of hair fell across her face. We're going. Within an hour, the rest of the team had gathered inside our tiny office. Nobody talked about money. Nobody asked about fame. We simply stood together, staring at one email that had changed every one of our lives. Michael arrived carrying a box of donuts. I figured somebody would finally do something worth celebrating. He looked around. So, Sophia pointed toward the screen. He adjusted his glasses. His smile grew wider with every line he read. I knew it. You did not. I absolutely did. He laughed. I was just waiting for proof. That afternoon, we went back to work. Not because we had to, because we wanted the demo to deserve its place. The next 6 weeks disappeared inside endless polishing, bug fixing, testing, and rewriting. Some nights we slept on the office floor. Some mornings we forgot what day it was. Nobody complained. Every improvement felt like another brick in a house we had built with our own hands. The convention center looked bigger than any place I had ever visited. Huge screens covered the walls. Thousands of visitors moved between booths. Developers from around the world unpacked their dreams. Sophia nudged my shoulder. Nervous? A little. She smiled. Good, good. It means this still matters. Our booth wasn't impressive. A simple banner. For computers. A few posters. Compared to the giant companies around us, we looked invisible. The doors opened. People flooded inside. Most walked right past us. Exactly what I expected. Then one teenager stopped. Can I try this? Of course. He sat down. 10 minutes later, another person joined him. Then another. Within an hour, every computer was occupied. People who finished playing didn't leave. They stayed. They talked. They smiled. One girl wiped tears from her eyes after finishing the opening chapter. I've never played anything like this. A middle-aged man removed his headphones slowly. Who wrote this story? I did. He held out his hand. Thank you. That simple handshake meant more than any paycheck I had ever received. By the second day, reporters started appearing. Microphones, cameras, questions. Where did the idea come from? How long have you worked on this project? What inspired the story? I answered honestly. Failure. The interviewer blinked. Failure? I nodded. Sometimes losing everything teaches you what actually matters. The interview spread online before lunch. Visitors doubled, then doubled again. Security had to place small barriers around our booth because the line kept growing. Late that evening, an older man wearing a Navy suit approached us. His name tag identified him as an investor. He finished the demo without speaking. When the credits rolled, he removed the headset. How much are you looking for? I exchanged a quick glance with Sophia. We're not actively selling. I didn't ask that. He smiled. I asked how much. Before I could answer, another woman joined us. I'm afraid you'll have to wait. She offered me her business card. Our company would like to discuss funding first. The older man laughed. So would mine. Within 2 hours, we had meetings scheduled with 6 different publishers. The tiny garage studio nobody believed in suddenly had options we never imagined. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stood alone outside the hotel, watching city lights reflect across the river. Michael stepped onto the balcony beside me. Thinking too much, trying not to. He folded his arms. You remember that warehouse? I smiled. Barely. You remember the leaking office? I remember every bucket we used to catch the rain. He chuckled. Don't forget those days. I won't. Promise. I looked back toward the convention hall. I built this dream there. I pointed somewhere far beyond the skyline. Not here. He nodded once. Then success won't change you. 3 months later, everything moved faster than I could keep up with. Investment offers became contracts. Contracts became a real office. The real office became a growing company. Employees filled rooms that once existed only in my notebook. The old folding tables were replaced by professional workstations. The leaking ceiling became glass windows overlooking the city. Every achievement felt unreal. Not because I believed I deserved less, because I still remembered counting coins before buying instant noodles. Every morning I walked through the office before anyone arrived. The smell of fresh coffee, the quiet hum of computers, the walls covered with artwork created by our growing team. Those moments reminded me why I started. Never for luxury, never for applause, only because I wanted to build worlds that made people feel something. One afternoon, my assistant stepped into my office. There's quite a crowd downstairs. I frowned. What happened? They're waiting for you. Me. She smiled. Book signing. I almost laughed. I've never written a book. You wrote a story. She pointed toward the lobby. To them. That's enough. The lobby looked nothing like the place I remembered renting 6 months earlier. People filled every corner. Some held copies of our art book. Others carried notebooks, posters, even laptops they wanted me to sign. A teenage boy stood at the front of the line, holding a worn sketchbook against his chest. I almost quit drawing. His hands trembled as he opened the first page. My parents kept telling me it wasn't a real career. He smiled nervously. Then I played Project Horizon. The pages were filled with characters from our game. Every line had been drawn by hand. I started again. For a moment, I couldn't find the right words. I simply signed the inside cover and handed it back. Don't stop because someone else can't see what you see. He nodded, holding the sketchbook as if it were something priceless. I won't. That conversation stayed with me longer than the applause did. Interviews became part of my routine. Cameras, bright lights, questions I had answered 100 times. One reporter leaned forward with a curious smile. People are calling you an overnight success. A quiet laugh escaped me. Overnight. She nodded. What would you call it? I pictured the leaking office, the warehouse, the sleepless nights, the restaurant where my dream became a joke. About 6 years. The audience laughed. I smiled with them. People usually notice the finish line. I rested my hands together. They rarely noticed the road. The clip spread online before evening. Thousands of comments appeared beneath it. Most were kind. Some called me inspiring. Others shared stories about dreams they had almost abandoned. I read only a few. Then I closed the app and returned to work. Success felt good. Creating still felt better. A month later, I received an invitation to speak at one of the biggest technology conferences in the country. Sophia leaned against my office door with 2 coffee cups. You should go. I'd rather stay here. She laughed. You've become the only CEO who hides from attention. I'm a developer. You became both. She placed 1 cup on my desk. And people need to hear your story. I'd rather they play the game. They'll do both. She wasn't wrong. The conference hall buzzed with conversations long before my session began. Huge company banners covered the walls. Executives walked between booths. Students waited with notebooks in their hands. An organizer adjusted the microphone clipped to my jacket. 5 minutes. I nodded. My eyes wandered across the crowd. Then they stopped. Olivia. She stood near one of the exhibition booths wearing a business suit and conference badge. She wasn't laughing. She wasn't smiling. She simply stared. For a second, neither of us moved. Her eyes widened as people began gathering around me. Ethan, can I get a picture? I loved your game. Someone handed me a notebook. Another person asked for an autograph. A young couple thanked me because Project Horizon had become their favorite game to play together. More people joined. The small crowd turned into a line. Across the room, Olivia remained exactly where she was. The same woman who once pushed my business plan aside was now watching strangers celebrate the dream she couldn't believe in. Our eyes met again. She took one hesitant step forward, then stopped. The organizers guided me toward the stage before either of us spoke. The presentation lasted 40 minutes. I talked about creativity, failure, persistence, teamwork. Every lesson had been written long before success arrived. When the audience stood and applauded, my mind wasn't on the stage. It drifted back to that restaurant, to the folder no one wanted to read, to the sentence that nearly made me quit. This is a hobby pretending to be a business. The applause finally faded. I stepped backstage. My assistant handed me my phone. You've been getting messages all afternoon. I unlocked the screen. Olivia, congratulations. Another message. Can we talk? 5 minutes later. I'm really happy for you. Then another. Please. Just a few minutes. My thumb hovered over the screen. I locked the phone without replying. Not because I wanted revenge, because I no longer knew what conversation could change the past. News traveled quickly. Daniel's name started appearing online for completely different reasons. Reports questioned financial decisions at his company. Former employees spoke about hidden deals. Investors pulled out one after another. His confident smile disappeared from magazine covers. Articles replaced it with words like investigation, losses, and resignation. I didn't celebrate. Someone else's downfall wasn't my victory. Still, I couldn't ignore the strange irony. The stability Olivia once admired had disappeared much faster than my dream ever could have. Days passed. More unread messages waited in my inbox. Some were only a few words. Can we meet? I owe you an apology. Please don't ignore me. Eventually, the messages became shorter. Then they stopped completely. That silence felt heavier than any argument we could have had. I buried myself in work instead. Our team announced the next expansion. New employees filled another floor. Project Horizon crossed another sales milestone. Life kept moving. One rainy afternoon, I stayed late at the office, reviewing concept art for our next game. A soft knock came from the door. Come in. The receptionist stepped inside. There's someone here to see you. I'm not taking meetings. It's Olivia's sister. Grace entered quietly before I could answer. She looked older than I remembered, more tired. She held a small wooden box with both hands. Without a word, she placed it on my desk. I think this belongs to you. I opened it slowly. Inside rested the engagement ring Olivia had never returned. The engagement ring rested inside the wooden box. It looked exactly the way I remembered. Simple. Silver. A tiny diamond I had spent almost a year saving for. I never imagined it would return to me like this. Grace remained standing across my desk, her hands folded tightly together. She looked exhausted. Not physically, emotionally. I closed the box carefully. Why now? She lowered her eyes. She couldn't bring herself to do it. The answer wasn't surprising. Still, it carried more weight than I expected. Sit down. She hesitated before taking the chair near my desk. The office suddenly felt much quieter. Outside the glass walls, employees moved between meetings, laughing and talking about deadlines. Inside, the past had quietly walked through my door. Grace took a slow breath. I don't expect you to forgive her. I'm not sure forgiveness is the problem. Another long pause settled between us. She's not okay. I stayed silent. Daniel left. I had read enough headlines to know his company had collapsed. I hadn't cared enough to learn what happened afterward. Grace gently rubbed her palms together. When the investigation started, he disappeared. He left the country? No. She shook her head. He left her. The words landed without satisfaction. There was no victory hiding inside them. He blamed her for bringing attention to him. Her voice became softer. One day he packed his things. And he never came back. I leaned back in my chair. Grace looked around the office before speaking again. You built everything she never believed in. I didn't build this for her. I know. A sad smile crossed her face. That's what hurts her the most. She reached into her purse and pulled out a folded photograph. It wasn't new. The edges were worn. I recognized it immediately. The beach. The same trip from the picture frame that had been turned face down. She placed it on my desk. She carries this everywhere. I stared at the photo without touching it. Why are you telling me this? Because everyone thinks she left you because she stopped loving you. She slowly shook her head. That isn't true. I looked up. Then tell me the truth. Grace nodded. My parents spent years convincing her that love wasn't enough. I listened without interrupting. They compared you to everyone. Every sentence reminded me of that dinner. They kept telling her that dreams don't pay bills. Another memory. They said she would spend her whole life worrying if she stayed with you. Grace's fingers tightened around her purse. Eventually, she swallowed. She started believing them. I closed my eyes for a brief moment. Not because it hurt, because it finally made sense. She chose fear. Grace nodded. She thought she was choosing safety. A bitter smile appeared on my face. There's a difference. She knows that now. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. The office clock quietly marked each passing moment. Did she ever stop loving me? Grace answered before I even finished asking. No. The certainty in her voice surprised me. Not once. I looked toward the window overlooking the city. So why didn't she fight for us? Because she thought she was protecting herself. Grace wiped away a tear before it reached her cheek. She believed she could learn to live without you. And you already know the answer. My eyes returned to the ring. No, I didn't know. Not completely. Grace stood slowly. She watches every interview. I didn't react. Every speech. Still nothing. She never skips one. I let out a quiet breath. That won't change anything. I know. She gave me a tired smile. I just wanted you to know she wasn't pretending. She turned toward the door. Just before leaving, she stopped. She's outside. I frowned. What? Grace looked back. She couldn't walk in. A strange feeling settled over me. Not excitement. Not anger. Only curiosity. She's been sitting in her car for almost an hour. Grace opened the door. I'll leave now. The office became quiet again. My eyes drifted toward the window. A black sedan stood across the street. Someone remained inside, waiting. I stayed where I was. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Eventually there was another knock. This time, I already knew who it would be. Come in. The door opened slowly. Olivia stepped inside. She looked familiar, yet completely different. The expensive confidence she once carried had disappeared. The designer clothes were gone. Dark circles rested beneath her eyes. She held the strap of her handbag tightly, almost as if it were the only thing keeping her steady. For several seconds, neither of us moved. Then her eyes found the wooden box on my desk. She recognized it immediately. The word caught in her throat. Another breath. Another failed attempt. Finally, she managed a weak smile that disappeared almost instantly. You've done well. I nodded politely. Thank you. Her gaze wandered around the office. The awards. The artwork. The people working through the glass walls. I remember when all of this fit inside one folder. I remembered, too, the folder she never wanted to read. She noticed the expression on my face and lowered her eyes. I deserve that. I didn't answer. Sometimes silence spoke more honestly than anger ever could. She remained standing, waiting for permission that never came. Finally, she whispered the only words that had been trapped inside her for years. I made the biggest mistake of my life. The words lingered between us. I made the biggest mistake of my life. Months ago, I had imagined this moment 100 different ways. I thought I would demand answers. I thought I would ask why I was never enough. Instead, I simply pulled out the chair across from my desk. Sit. She lowered herself into the chair carefully, almost afraid she didn't deserve it. Her hands rested in her lap. They wouldn't stop shaking. The confident woman who once planned every detail of our future had disappeared. I've practiced this conversation so many times. A nervous smile appeared for a second. None of those versions sounded this difficult. I remained quiet. There was no need to rush her. She drew a slow breath. When we were together, I kept waiting for the day your dream would become safe. Her eyes lifted toward mine. I told myself I was being practical. She laughed softly, but there was no joy behind it. I called it maturity. The smile faded. It was fear. Another pause. My parents kept asking the same questions. She looked down at her hands. What if he fails? Another breath. What if he never earns enough? Her fingers tightened. What kind of future can he give you? She closed her eyes. After hearing those questions for years, a tear slipped onto her sleeve. They became my own. I remembered every conversation we had about my dream. Every time I tried to explain my plans. Every time she asked me to wait. Not because she hated the dream, because she was afraid of it. You chose certainty. A slow nod answered me. I thought I did. She wiped her face. Daniel looked successful. He did. He always knew the right things to say. Her voice cracked. I mistook confidence for character. The office grew quiet again. Outside, my team continued working. Keyboards clicked. Phones rang. Life kept moving. Inside this room, time had slowed to a whisper. When his company started falling apart, she stared at the floor. I finally saw the person he really was. Her shoulders dropped. The moment investors left, another painful smile. He left too. I didn't interrupt. She needed to finish. I kept thinking about you. Her eyes filled again. About all those nights you came home exhausted. A faint laugh escaped her. You still opened your laptop. I remembered. Warehouse during the day. Coding through the night. For hours of sleep if I was lucky. I thought you were wasting your life. She shook her head. You were building it. The words settled gently inside me. Not because they erased the past. Because they explained it. She reached into her handbag and pulled out an old envelope. I never stopped carrying this. Inside was the first movie ticket we had ever bought together. The paper had faded. The date was barely visible. You kept it everywhere. She smiled through tears. I kept pretending I had moved on. Her fingers brushed across the ticket. I never did. I looked at the small memories spread across my desk. The beach photo. The movie ticket. The engagement ring resting inside its wooden box. Pieces of a life that no longer existed. I'm sorry. She whispered the words carefully, not expecting them to fix anything. I don't expect another chance. Her breathing became uneven. I just needed you to know. She struggled to finish. That I loved you. I know. She looked up in surprise. You know? I nodded. I never doubted that. Confusion crossed her face. Then why? Because love wasn't the problem. I folded my hands together. Belief was. She stared at me. You loved me. Another quiet breath. But you never believed in me. The truth hung in the room. Heavy. Impossible to escape. I spent years trying to prove I deserved your faith. My eyes drifted toward the glass walls of the office. I worked longer. I saved more. I planned every detail. Nothing had been enough. You kept asking me to wait. A tired smile crossed my face. There was always another milestone. After we save more. After we get married. After we buy a house. After life feels safer. I met her eyes again. My dream always had to wait. She covered her mouth. I know. I finally realized something. I stood and walked toward the window overlooking the city. Success didn't change me. Cars moved through the streets below. People hurried along the sidewalks. The world looked much bigger than the apartment where everything had ended. It revealed people. I turned back toward her. It showed me who believed in me before there was anything to celebrate. Sophia. Michael. A tiny team inside a leaking garage. They stayed. My voice remained calm. They never asked me to become someone else. Olivia lowered her head. I wasn't one of them. No. She cried quietly. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just enough to show the weight she had been carrying. I wish I could go back. So do I. Hope flashed across her face. It disappeared when I continued. I'd still choose my dream. The room fell still. But this time, I smiled gently. I'd choose myself much sooner. I walked back to my desk and picked up the small wooden box. Opening it one last time, I lifted the engagement ring. The diamond caught the afternoon sunlight. Years ago, it had represented the future I wanted. Now it represented the past I had accepted. I stepped closer and gently placed the ring into her trembling hand. Her fingers closed around it automatically. I can't take this. You already did. A tear rolled down her cheek. Ethan, there isn't anything left for you to return. She looked at the ring, then back at me. Every apology she still wanted to speak disappeared before reaching her lips. There were no words capable of rebuilding the years we had lost. I picked up my jacket from the chair. Without anger. Without bitterness. Only peace. As I reached the door, I paused for one brief moment. I truly hope you find happiness. She couldn't answer. The ring remained pressed against her heart. I opened the door and walked into the hallway. This time, I didn't wait for anyone to stop me. And without looking back, I kept walking forward. The countdown reached 0. Cheers erupted across the auditorium. Our company's logo filled the giant screen, followed by the opening scene of our first global release. Project Horizon, the same dream people once called impossible, was now launching in countries I had only read about as a kid. The audience stood and applauded. I stayed where I was for a second. My hands rested against the edge of the stage. Not because I was nervous, because my mind had traveled somewhere else. Back to the tiny office above the repair shop. Back to the leaking ceiling. Back to instant noodles, second-hand computers, and nights that seemed endless. Someone gently touched my shoulder. Sophia smiled. "They're waiting for you." I looked toward the crowd. Thousands of faces. Employees, investors, journalists, developers, players, people who believed in the game before it ever reached this stage. I walked to the microphone. The applause slowly faded. A deep breath settled my thoughts. Everyone keeps congratulating me today. A few people smiled. But this story was never about one person. The giant screen behind me changed to old photographs. Our first garage office. Foldable tables. Whiteboards covered with sketches. Pizza boxes stacked beside computer monitors. Soft laughter echoed through the audience. I remember when our biggest argument was whether we could afford another chair. More laughter. I remember sleeping beside my desk because going home wasted too much time. Sophia shook her head, laughing quietly. "You really did." I smiled. Some dreams are built with talent. I looked toward my team. Ours was built with stubbornness. The room filled with applause again. I raised my hand gently. There are people standing here today who worked through weekends without complaining. Several team members exchanged embarrassed smiles. There are people who stayed when success wasn't guaranteed. My eyes found Michael sitting in the front row. My brother never told me to quit. Michael folded his arms with a proud grin. He only asked one question. I smiled. "Are you quitting? Or are you trying?" He laughed and shook his head. "I knew you'd repeat that." The audience laughed with him. Then I turned towards Sophia. She called me when almost everyone else believed my dream had already failed. Sophia lowered her head modestly. "I only made one phone call. It changed my life." She blinked quickly, trying not to cry. The applause grew louder than before. I waited until it settled. If anyone here has a dream people don't understand. The room became completely quiet. Don't ask everyone for permission. A few heads nodded. Not everyone will believe in you. Another pause. And that's okay. I looked across the audience. You only need a few people who believe enough to keep walking beside you. The applause returned once more. This time it lasted much longer. The launch became one of the biggest gaming stories of the year. Sales climbed faster than any of us expected. Review scores appeared across every major website. 96, 98. Perfect scores. Messages flooded my inbox from players around the world. One father wrote that he finished the game with his daughter over 3 weekends. A college student thanked us for reminding him not to abandon his goals. An artist shared drawings inspired by our characters. Those messages meant more than every headline. Money had solved problems. Those stories gave everything meaning. Late that evening, our team gathered on the rooftop of the office building. No reporters, no cameras, just pizza, music, and people who had earned every reason to celebrate. Michael raised a paper cup, a toast. Everyone lifted theirs. To Ethan, I laughed immediately. No. He frowned playfully. No. To all of us. Sophia nodded. He's right. One of our programmers pointed toward me. Still, he smiled. You started this. I looked around the rooftop. The city lights stretched in every direction. Months ago, I had imagined success would feel loud. Instead, it felt peaceful. We talked until the sky turned dark. People shared stories from the early days. The leaking roof, broken coffee machine, power outages, software crashes 5 minutes before presentations. Every disaster had somehow become a favorite memory. Sophia leaned against the railing beside me. Thinking again? A little. You always do this. What? The bigger the celebration. She smiled. The quieter you become. I watched the lights below. I used to think success would erase the past. And it doesn't. She nodded gently. It just gives it a different meaning. Neither of us spoke after that. We didn't need to. Some conversations were complete before words ever arrived. Across the city, another screen showed the same launch event. Only one person watched it from beginning to end. Olivia sat alone inside her apartment. The room was quiet except for the television. When my old garage office appeared on the screen, she covered her mouth. She recognized every picture. The folding table, the notebook, the worn backpack she once bought me for my birthday. She remembered laughing when I filled that notebook with ideas. Now millions of people were celebrating the same dream. She reached for the remote, then stopped. The screen showed me thanking everyone who stayed when success looked impossible. Her eyes slowly filled with tears. Not because another woman had taken her place. Not because Daniel had disappeared. Not because she wanted the money. The truth was much harder to face. She hadn't lost me to success. She had lost me the day she stopped believing in the man standing beside her. 3 days after the launch, the celebration finally slowed down. The office returned to its normal rhythm. Design meetings replaced interviews. Whiteboards filled with new ideas. Developers argued over game mechanics instead of sales numbers. Life felt normal again. That was exactly how I wanted it. My assistant stepped into the office holding a small envelope. This was delivered this morning. I thanked her and opened it. There was no letter. Only a single newspaper clipping. It showed a picture from the launch event. The headline read, "The dream everyone laughed at is changing the gaming industry." There was no name attached. No signature. I quietly folded the clipping and placed it inside my desk drawer. Some messages didn't need answers. That evening I drove somewhere I hadn't visited in almost 2 years. The apartment building looked exactly the same. The paint was still peeling near the entrance. The old mailbox leaned slightly to one side. Even the hallway carried the familiar smell of worn carpet and fresh coffee. The landlord recognized me immediately. "Ethan?" A surprised smile crossed his face. "I almost didn't believe it was really you. It's been a while." He laughed. "A famous man coming back to this place?" I smiled. "I'm just visiting." He handed me the spare key. "Take your time." My footsteps echoed softly as I climbed the stairs. The apartment door opened with the same quiet creak I remembered. Nothing had changed. The tiny living room, the worn wooden floor, the window where rain used to keep me company during long nights. Dust covered almost everything. The old desk still stood beside the wall. A deep scratch ran across the surface where my chair had rubbed against it for years. I ran my fingers over it slowly. This is where it all started. The words escaped before I realized I had spoken them aloud. The broken computer monitor still rested in the corner. It no longer worked. I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. That old machine had crashed more times than I could count. Still, it had carried the first version of Project Horizon. A faded notebook waited inside the top drawer. Its pages were filled with rough sketches, character designs, story ideas, tiny reminders written after midnight. One sentence stopped me. "One day people will believe in this world." I smiled. They finally do. Not because I proved someone wrong, because I refused to quit. I sat in the old chair for several minutes. No phone, no meetings, no cameras, only memories. Some made me laugh. Others still carried a quiet ache. Yet none of them controlled me anymore. Before leaving, I opened my phone. One unread message still remained. Olivia. It had been there for months. The final message she ever sent. "I hope one day you find the happiness I couldn't give you." My thumb rested on the screen. Years ago, deleting it would have felt impossible. Today it felt peaceful. I pressed delete. The conversation disappeared. No anger. No satisfaction. Just acceptance. Then I opened my wallet. Inside was one last photograph. A picture from our beach vacation. The edges had become soft from years of carrying it. I looked at it one final time. 2 young people smiling at a future they believed would last forever. I whispered a quiet goodbye. Not to her. To the version of myself who believed love alone could survive without trust. The photo slipped into a nearby recycling bin. My wallet felt lighter. So did my heart. A week later our team gathered for breakfast before starting work. Sophia noticed something different. You've been smiling a lot lately. Michael laughed before I could answer. He's sleeping more than 4 hours now. Everyone laughed. I raised my coffee cup. Miracles happen. One of the younger developers looked at me curiously. Can I ask something? Of course. Were you ever angry? The question surprised me. I was. What changed? I thought for a moment. When someone hurts you, the whole table became quiet. You can spend your life hoping they feel the same pain. A short pause settled over us. Or you can spend that time building a life so meaningful that the pain slowly loses its place. The young developer nodded thoughtfully. I like that answer. So do I. For the first time in years, those words felt completely true. Not because life had become perfect, because I had stopped measuring it through someone else's approval. Across town, Olivia stood outside a bookstore. Our game filled an entire display window. Children pointed excitedly at the artwork. Parents bought copies without knowing the story behind it. She stood there for a long time. Then she smiled, a sad smile, not because she expected another chance. She already knew that chapter had ended. She finally understood what she had truly lost. It was never the company, never the success, never the recognition. She had lost the chance to stand beside someone who believed in an impossible dream until it became real. Some regrets never disappear. They simply become quieter with time. As the sun began to set, I locked the office and stepped outside. The city looked different now, not because it had changed, because I had. The road ahead was still unknown. New games, new challenges, new failures waiting to teach new lessons. For the first time, none of that frightened me. I had already survived losing the person I thought I couldn't live without. Everything after that became easier to face. I slipped my hands into my pockets and started walking, not toward the past, not toward revenge, toward the future I had built one difficult day at a time. I walked away without looking back, not because I stopped loving her, but because I finally learned to love myself first. The dream she laughed at became the life she could only watch from a distance. And that was the quietest, most complete victory I could have ever asked for.